Tsunoda officially replaces Lawson starting from the Japan Grand Prix, with Lawson demoted after just 2 races. So it will be interesting to see how Tsunoda will perform in Red Bull and Lawson in Racing Bulls. But what are the reasons behind this change? Didn't Verstappen approve of it? In today's video, we are going to look at this. We also need to look at the problems of the Ferrari SF25 and how they will be resolved for Japan. In conclusion, we must revisit the V10 engines due to recent updates. Before we start, please leave a supportive like, subscribe if you are not yet subscribed, and now let's look at everything in detail. Red Bull has decided Liam Lawson will no longer be Max Verstappen's teammate. After just 2 Grand Prix, the Milton Keynes team has officially announced that Yuki Tsunoda will be joining the world champion starting from the Japan Grand Prix scheduled for next week in Suzuka. The date is not random because it's Yuki's home Grand Prix, and the announcement came jointly with Racing Bulls, the team with which Tsunoda has raced in the last seasons and where Lawson is now set to return. The sudden turnaround doesn't surprise Red Bull, as they have done it before, but according to Christian Horner, it's dictated solely by sporting reasons. It was tough seeing Liam struggle in the first 2 races with the RB21. We decided together to make the change sooner. We want to defend the driver's title and take back the constructor's one. Yuki's experience will be valuable in the development of the single-seater. Tsunoda will make his main team debut in grand style at his home crowd in Suzuka. But the pressure will be extremely high, and the direct comparison with Verstappen has often burned his predecessors. No driver has matched Max Verstappen's performance since Daniel Ricciardo's departure. Neither Kvyat, Gasly, Albon, Perez nor Lawson so far. And only Gasly and Albon have managed to relaunch themselves elsewhere in Formula 1. The Japanese will face the biggest challenge of his career, aware that this opportunity could define his future in the top series. For Lawson, a new chapter begins. After 4 months as a main driver, starting with the Abu Dhabi 2024 tests and continuing with just over a day and a half of pre-season testing, the time available was minimal, the patience even less. Helmut Marko decided to intervene immediately, perhaps also due to the lack of strong sponsors behind the New Zealander. Paradoxically, this could be an opportunity for Lawson. The return to Racing Bulls, where he had performed well in 2023 and 2024, could relaunch him. The V-Carb 02 seems to be a competitive single-seater, although so far restrained, the strategy is questionable. If he can exploit the potential, Lawson could follow the trajectory of Gasly and Albon. Away from Red Bull, but with a future still to be written, we have a duty to protect and grow Liam, Horner concluded. Returning to an environment he knows well is the right choice to allow him to gain experience and continue to build his Formula 1 career. And many of you have asked me if I think this is the right choice that Red Bull should make. From my point of view, taking Yuki Tsunoda and putting him in the official team was the choice they should have made at the start of the season. Tsunoda should have been in Red Bull and Lawson in Racing Bulls instead of Perez. Continuing to give the New Zealand driver experience and pairing him with Isaac Ajar, who is a great driver but is a rookie. For Tsunoda, it was time to debut in the official team, so it's right that he goes to Red Bull. Sure, I wouldn't have done it now 2 races from the start of the season because it's also a bad gesture towards the driver. At this point, having made the decision to put Lawson in Red Bull, they should have given him at least more races to see if the New Zealand driver could bring out something more. Surely 2 races are not enough to evaluate a driver, so in my opinion, the drastic approach of Red Bull has ruined Lawson and continues to ruin the young ones in Red Bull. Tsunoda, however, now has a bit more experience in Formula 1. Allowing him to debut with Red Bull at the start of the season made sense. His performance from the Japan Grand Prix onwards will be telling. It will be interesting to see the comparison with the same car between Tsunoda and Lawson in the first races, and Helmut Marko is still on the hunt for the new Max Verstappen. Perhaps it's time to change the method, because the all-against Verstappen policy continues to claim victims. McLaren teaches that there is also another way. In fact, Red Bull continues its carousel of teammates. The latest to be catapulted and immediately sent back is Liam Lawson. Good luck to Yuki Tsunoda, who is ready for this Red Bull experience, though he doesn't truly know what lies ahead. The director of everything is always Helmut Marko, still in search of another Verstappen. But the reality now evident is that talent is unique, and while Marko chases a ghost, he burns an entire generation of drivers of the nursery. Lawson. With only a day and a half of testing in Bahrain across 3 sessions, they never really had a chance. Of free trials between Melbourne and Shanghai, and then immediately out. All this without even having competed a full season in Formula 1. How can a young driver be evaluated like this? Alexander Albon, Max Verstappen's teammate for 26 races before being dropped by Red Bull in 2020, aptly characterized the team. It's like driving a computer with the mouse at maximum sensitivity. The onboard images of the RB21 speak clearly. It's hard to tame, nervous on entry, and Lawson had to fight more with the car than with the opponents. The problem is structural. The single-seaters designed by Milton Keynes are becoming more and more extreme, and Verstappen himself pointed this out in 2024 when the team had to respond to McLaren's growth. Helmut Marko's solution was to find another Verstappen. However, such talent cannot be found on demand. Today, Red Bull races with only one car at best until a new direction is taken or an equivalent champion to Max is discovered, a very remote possibility the script will not change. And the first to get tired could be Verstappen himself, especially if the car stops being a winner. Tsunoda arrives in a difficult context but with less pressure. Unlike Lawson, he has 4 seasons in Formula 1 behind him and knows the environment, but for him too, this is a sliding door. Red Bull's future is uncertain, particularly with the waning relationship between Dallas and their longtime sponsor Honda. If he does well, it will be a jackpot, otherwise the chapter will close soon. For Lawson, the return to Racing Bulls feels like a farewell, as no one has returned to the main team after a demotion. More than a second chance, it seems like a way to usher him towards the exit. Yet we're talking about a driver who has shown talent in his brief previous appearances. 3 months ago, he was a rising star, now he's considered out of the game. Red Bull can indeed do whatever they want. No one forces the drivers to accept the academy with a gun to their head. But perhaps it's time to ask a question, is this really the right method? McLaren in the meantime has chosen another path. After Oscar Piastri's victory in Shanghai, team principal Andrea Stella discussed the work done with the Australian. Months of discussion, analysis of past races, growth step by step. A concrete example comes from the 2024 Shanghai Grand Prix, where Piastri finished 8th, more than 40 seconds behind Norris. On that occasion, Stella told him there's a lot to learn, and the result came a year later. In essence, McLaren has a different approach and philosophy, possibly offering a more sustainable path for Formula One's future. In fact, there are 2 crucial points to emphasize about this situation. The first is that Verstappen was against Lawson's departure from Red Bull. He wanted to keep him on the team because he thinks the problems are more related to the car than Lawson's inability to perform well. We know the talent of the New Zealand driver, and Verstappen has also defended him. And the second point is that if the car is not competitive and Verstappen is unable to fight at the top because Red Bull is losing performance over time, well, in that case, Verstappen might decide to look for another team. And in that case, Helmut Marko, Christian Horner would find himself in a bad situation without a leading driver in a top team. In my opinion, Tsunoda has agreed to go to Red Bull, but he is not very aware of the risks he will face, but we will also see this on the track, and it will be interesting to see whether or not he can make a difference. In my opinion, the problem lies more with the system than the driver in this particular case. Whoever you put in that second seat at Red Bull struggles, and not a little, compared to Verstappen, who knows the Red Bull by heart and therefore knows every strength and weakness and develops the car on his driving style. So the question remains, is Red Bull right to replace Lawson with Tsunoda after just 2 races? But above all, why is Verstappen the only one who can drive the Red Bull? Lawson stated on the radio that the RB21 has issues turning corners, braking and handling tires. In short, it seems like a difficult car that would require a long learning curve, but Red Bull never has that time. The real secret is Max's sensitivity. In fact, it's not just a matter of custom development, it's a matter of natural sensitivity. Albon and Perez in the past also asked for more precision at the front, just like Verstappen. The difference is that Max manages to handle that extreme sensitivity while the others do not. No, Verstappen dominates with surgical precision, which makes him unique. The RB21, like its predecessors, works well on a very narrow setup window. Finding it requires experience, adaptation, and patience. The Bear lacked the time and support needed to succeed. He struggled to heat up the humps and found himself out in the cone and paid the price. Yet he's not a slow driver, neither was Perez. In fact, the Mexican had anticipated some car problems in 2024, especially at the suspension level. But he was ignored. The car was winning, so his observations were sidelined. There would be a way to improve. Custom coaching simulator, data analysis, driving refinement need to work on trajectory and braking. Acceleration management turn by turn requires weeks or months. Red Bull prefers the shortcut. Change driver to try to save the Constructors' Championship, even if the price to pay is high. Ozon is just the latest victim of this system. Verstappen is a champion because he adapts to the car. The Red Bull has become a car built around his driving style, but not by strategy, simply because he can drive it like no one else. So the question is not just why only Max can, but rather how much longer Red Bull can continue with a car that only 1 in 20 really knows how to drive. And while on one hand Red Bull struggles to find a second driver who can handle the RB21, on the other hand we have Ferrari suffering from understeer and instability at the rear. But why doesn't the SF25 work? What are the expected changes? Ferrari is in crisis, as evidenced by the results of the initial 2025 races. The SF25 did not meet expectations and the overall performance was below the team's potential and the value of the drivers. The China Grand Prix confirmed that difficulties already emerged in Australia, and explanations are also beginning to emerge on a technical level. Technical director Loic Serra has ruled out correlation issues between data and track. However, there is a sense of emergency in Maranello. Strategic mistakes, poor setups, double disqualification in China, and a disappointing Australian weekend. Unlike Red Bull, which manages to maximize the potential of its single-seater even with a difficult car to drive and with only one driver, Ferrari doesn't even seem to understand how to make the SF25 work for both drivers. And the team has not been able to put an effective package on the track, and the setup changes have not solved the problems. To confirm this, just think of Hamilton's victory in the Shanghai push, followed by a disastrous drop in performance for the rest of the weekend. The real problem, though, is understeer, not oversteer. A closer look at the SF25's behavior clarifies a fundamental aspect. The onboard footage shows that Hamilton and Leclerc entered the curve's apex with an overly pronounced steering angle. When they accelerate on exit, the rear doesn't have enough grip to support the car during traction, generating instability. The problem stems from a front axle with insufficient turning capacity, not from the rear. The drivers themselves have confirmed this difficulty in finding rotations when entering a curve. And in Formula 1, if the front doesn't respond, the whole balance goes into crisis. The chronic understeer of the SF25 is also linked to another factor. The peak load generated by the rear of the car, Ferrari, has designed a bottom that in the right operating window creates a lot of downforce, but this window is too narrow, and as soon as the car comes out of it, as often happens in the race, the balance goes out of control. The excessive load on the rear axle unbalances the car, shifting the dynamic center of gravity too far back and thus causing understeer behavior. Other top teams like McLaren and Red Bull have adopted a different approach instead of aiming for maximum load. Possible, they work. To limit its peak, thus obtaining a more stable downforce and a more predictable balance. With ground effect wing cars, all teams face the same dilemma, finding the right compromise between load and stability. For now, Ferrari seems to be behind on this front. The updates planned for the upcoming races should help reduce the peak load at the rear, improving the interaction between the floor and the suspensions, and above all, stabilize the behavior of the SF25. The potential is there, but it needs to be unlocked with targeted and progressive work. To better grasp Ferrari's project, we must examine where the Ferrari SF25 excels. And in what conditions? The positive signal came from the sprint race in Shanghai. Guy Lewis Hamilton took the pole and won with authority, leaving behind even the McLarens. A flash that showed the value of the SF25, but also its limits. That performance came with just 88 pounds of fuel on board and a ground-level setup. In the long race, with 220 pounds in the tank and raised heights to avoid wear and bottoming problems, the car's behavior drastically worsened. The aerodynamic load generated by the bottom has collapsed, and with it, the stability and tire management. The result is an anonymous race worsened by technical irregularities that have cost both drivers their disqualification. Another critical point is the diffuser keel. Ferrari has introduced a stepped solution designed to increase the load if kept at the right height, but as soon as the setup changes for fuel, potholes, or setup, the system no longer works. According to internal sources, there will be no revolutions on the suspension, but a targeted intervention is being evaluated on the diffuser geometry with a sort of cut and sew to widen the operating window. Updates will definitely arrive in Bahrain, unlikely in Suzuka, but in the meantime, on the Japanese track, resurfaced but full of depressions, Ferrari will have to find a perfect balance of setup, avoiding alternating pole performances with vertical falls in the group. Another disappointing trip after Australia and China would be unacceptable given the winter proclamations. SF25 needs concreteness, clarity, and above all, more stability in every condition. So we'll see how Ferrari will improve with the updates planned for Bahrain, and we'll see if there will be any advanced micro-aerodynamics solution at Suzuka, a circuit with many dips and difficult to manage due to the ground clearance. I'd like to briefly discuss V10 engines. In fact, the V10 engine option is not a nostalgic return, but a bi-realistic plan. The goal is to revert to high-performance naturally aspirated engines, but powered by 100% sustainable fuels. A return to the roar of the internal combustion engine, perhaps accompanied by a light hybrid component, similar to the old 2009 kinetic energy recovery system, would still guarantee efficiency and energy recovery without the current complexity. It would not be a simple return to the past, but a logical transition. The 2026 power units could become a bridge generation, useful for acquiring know-how on ecological fuels and paving the way for a less complex, more accessible and more engaging Formula One.
In this
scenario, Formula One could finally return to an element that many consider essential, the sound. The V10 could once again take center stage on tracks around the world, and this time it wouldn't just be a suggestion. In fact, the new power units for 2026 designed to open a new technical chapter and attract new manufacturers are proving to be more complex than expected. Now, in the paddock's heart, people are seriously discussing alternatives. That's why the V10 engine is not just a romantic dream, but is becoming a concrete possibility. The revision of the power unit rules was born with a specific goal to attract new manufacturers like Audi and Porsche by lowering the technological entry barriers. The abandonment of the MGUH seemed to go in that direction, but the reality is quite different. Honda, Red Bull powertrains and Audi face many challenges in developing the new power units. The management of the hybrid, combined with the need to maximize the efficiency of the thermal engine, is proving to be a puzzle. Some teams have called the first simulations disastrous, prompting the Fédération Internationale de l'Automobile to intervene with changes to the 2026 car's technical and aerodynamic regulations, even before they hit the track. In my view, bringing back the V10 engine would benefit everyone. Engine manufacturers could develop simpler engines, and fans would enjoy the enhanced sound of the engines on the track. Let me know your opinion on all the topics we covered in the video. As always, I remind you to leave a like, subscribe, and activate notifications so you don't miss any video that comes out here on the channel. Every day we comment on all the news about Formula One and specifically about Ferrari. I leave you other related videos here from Rasta Tuto. See you in the next video.